Widely considered among the most cunning, ruthless, wealthy, successful, and influential peoples of the galaxy, the Hutt species were large gastropods with slug-like bodies, thick skin, long tails, small arms, and bulbous heads, slithering on their bellies to move. Born without skeletal structures, their bodies and heads were supported by an internal mantle. Suffering from low fertility rates, they birthed children through hermaphroditic reproduction, possessing both male and female reproductive organs, allowing them to choose their gender as needed, able to produce offspring alone or in pairs. These children were born blind and helpless, weighing less than 100 grams before moving into the pouches of a parent for up to 50 years, emerging at a weight of roughly 70 kilograms, with the intelligence of a 10-year-old human. Reaching adulthood at the age of 200, when they weighed around 500 kilograms, the Hutt's natural lifespan lasted over 1,000 years, and at times grew so large they became immobile, considering greater size an indication of prestige, which meant treating the smaller among them as lesser beings. Given 3 names, only the first was told to outsiders, while the second represented their clan, and the third was only used and understood by their own people, possibly indicating an honorary title or family designation. Despite a strong, muscular tail able to attack opponents and wide jaws to consume prey, the immense size and slow movements of the Hutt species meant they had limited offensive capabilities, yet they made up for this in part with highly effective defensive traits, including thick skin resistant to most dangerous chemicals or corrosive agents, which produced a slick, oily substance making them difficult to grasp, as well as heavy blubber and muscles to protect vital organs, their regeneration of damaged or removed body parts, the ability to breathe toxic air, the production of a powerful odor, and eyes that saw ultraviolet light. Even so, their physical limitations often left them feeling vulnerable and disadvantaged, resulting in a deep sense of paranoia, making up for this weakness by valuing greed, selfishness, and manipulation, ever eager to expand their personal and clan dominance to secure their safety and prosperity. This profound sense of self-preservation and need for aggrandizement often led Hutts to act amorally, doing whatever was in their best interest regardless of any moral or ethical considerations. Believing themselves above other species, they made no attempt to deny or justify their illicit activities, freely engaging in criminal ventures like gambling, smuggling, the spice trade, and slavery. The only laws and customs to which they did adhere were those of their own people, such as their religious worship of Ivana and Ardos, the 2 sons of their homeworld, as well as their adherence to a caste system and emphasis on profiteering, clan loyalty, and vengeance. Engaging in personal combat only as a last resort, Hutts surrounded themselves with faithful minions, mercenaries, and ferocious pets to defend them and their holdings, as well as entertainers, flatterers, servants, advisors, allies, and slaves as a means to display their wealth and social status. Known to be generous toward their most loyal sycophants, some Hutts also made a point of displaying desirable slaves of other species, even if they personally did not find them attractive, as a statement to outsiders that they owned what others wanted. Though the Hutts were unrepentant slavers, they also recognized that forced labor produced an unmotivated workforce prone to rebellion and runaways, and so to mitigate these risks, some preferred indentured servitude, exploiting those in desperate situations to voluntarily sign contracts suspending their rights to work for the Hutts. Either way, these laborers often worked to extract natural resources like mining for minerals, adrenals, and gas, stripping conquered worlds of all their value for trade on the galactic market. Speaking the language Huttese, they used the currencies Whoopie, Truggets, and Pegats, which nearing the end of the Galactic Republic saw 1 Trugget worth 10 standard credits. Hailing from the rich, lush, temperate forest world of Varl in the Mid-Rim Ardo system, the Hutts evolved alongside the Talanda Till, and possibly the Rybit species, which claimed to fight a devastating war with the Hutts, though few believe their outlandish tales. one of the many planets conquered by the ruthless, Force-sensitive Rakatan Infinite Empire during the pre-Republic era. The Hutts rebelled and won their independence under Ardus Stag the Absolute, after which they seized much of the advanced technology of their former masters, using it to leave the system and conquer an empire of their own. Led by explorers and visionaries like Voramaz the Brooding, the Hutts became an aggressive, warlike, expansionist power, seizing worlds to plunder their natural resources while exterminating or enslaving the population. Though often successful in their efforts, some few resisted Hutt conquest, like the Ryleb people, who defeated a violent invasion of their world, while the Sakians maintained their independence by offering tribute and valuable commerce to keep the Hutts happy. Then there were the Nimbanels, who noticed Hutt expansion nearing their space, and so preemptively made a deal with Zocheb the Hutt, voluntarily joining the Empire in exchange for retaining many of their freedoms and favorable living conditions. Yet after greatly expanding their territory and influence, the Hutts at last met a power offering a significant challenge to their rule, making contact with the Warlord Zim the Despot, leader of the Tianese humans from the Tion cluster. Reigning over a large empire of his own, Zim the Despot engaged in diplomacy with the Hutts, who respected his relative strength, and so offered to make the Tianese favored slaves in exchange for their surrender and servitude. Greatly offended by their arrogance, Zim declared war in 25102 BBY, defeating and sacking the planet Kovari, savagely attacking Slaheyron, and organizing a native rebellion on Moralan. In retaliation, the Hutts selected Cossack Inishik Arduri as clan general, and hired mercenaries to strike against Tianese trade routes, slowly turning Zim's allies against him. Raising a vast slave army, the Hutts slowly pushed the enemy back, achieving a hard-fought victory in the Battle of Slaheyron, forcing the enemy fleet to Zozai, later called Kessel, where many ships were lost to black holes. Turning the tide of war, the Hutts achieved victory in the First Battle of Vontor, but suffered a severe blow in the Second Battle of Vontor, resulting in a draw, only to at last win a final victory in the Third Battle of Vontor in 25100 BBY, after striking deals with the Clatuinians, Vodrons, and Nikto to reinforce their armies, bringing them into the Empire under the Treaty of Vontor. Utterly defeated, Zim was captured, imprisoned on Varl, possibly blinded, and died a slave, but the war continued for a few more years, allowing the Hutts to secure their space, take the Cyclada cluster, attack the Tion cluster, and raid the Kyrium reaches, making it a buffer zone between their realms, until finally ending the conflict in 25096 BBY. The Hutts again went to war around 24,000 BBY, when they encountered the wealthy core worlds and fledgling Galactic Republic, launching devastating invasions to depopulate and plunder their planets while enslaving survivors. Terrified of this dangerous new threat, many of the core's independent worlds eagerly joined the Republic to bolster their defenses, thereby allowing this young power to greatly expand and increase their influence across the region. Despite being guarded by the Force-sensitive Jedi Order, the Republic were in a precarious position, under threat from the invasion of the Hutts, while also fighting the Tianese War against the Honorable Union of Desevro and Tion, and so concocted a plan to turn these enemies against each other. Sending their agents to provoke war, the Hutts became convinced the humans of the Republic and Tion cluster might one day join forces, and so launched a preemptive strike by annihilating the population of the Kyrium reaches in an event remembered as the Devouring, leaving only barren, radioactive planets later known as the Ash Worlds. With the aid of the Hutts, the Republic gained a significant advantage in the Tianese War, leaving the enemy so desperate they resorted to suicide strikes, which enraged and motivated the core worlds to launch a campaign of mass destruction and forced sterilization, only halting their cruelty thanks to the efforts of the Jedi Order. Continuing to suffer attacks from the Hutt Empire, the Tion cluster felt compelled to reach out to their less dangerous adversaries and joined the Galactic Republic by 23,900 BBY. For over 10,000 years, the Hutt Empire expanded their territory and influence to become one of the greatest powers in the galaxy, until suffering a near-fatal blow around 15,000 BBY, which nearly destroyed their civilization, forcing them to completely reform their government and society. Among the various theories that surrounded the origins of this terrible cataclysm, the Hutts themselves perpetuated a mythological explanation, claiming it started when the sun god Ivana was pulled into a black hole, causing chaos among the other planets of the system, which collided and broke apart into asteroids that bombarded their homeworld of Varl. Devastated by the loss of his mate, the sun god Ardos expelled his energy and collapsed into a white dwarf, destroying Varl's atmosphere to leave it a barren, desolate wasteland unable to sustain life. Others, however, claim the destruction of Varl occurred after a terrible civil war, in which the Hutts employed horrifying tactics and weapons of mass destruction that utterly ravaged their planet and system. Whatever the case, the remaining Hutts fled aboard a caravan of ships, believing their survival meant they were greater than the gods they once worshipped, and were destined to rule the galaxy as deities in their own right. In search of a new home, they eventually found the temperate forest world of Evakar in the Yuuzhan system, steadily purchasing land from the native Evokai, a technologically primitive species gradually swindled into losing their entire planet. Relocated to the moon Nar Shaddaa, where the Hutts established a prominent spaceport, the Evokai were relegated to a permanent underclass used as a source of cheap labor. Renamed Nal Hutta, meaning glorious jewel in Huttese, the planet formerly known as Evokar in the Yuuzhan system had its greenery transformed into vast swamplands, producing a strong, pungent odor that greatly pleased the new Hutt population. Still reeling from the near collapse of their civilization, Budhilla Hestilik Amura led their people to embrace a large-scale reformation, gathering a group of nobles who could trace their ancestry to Varl, so they might form the Hutt Grand Council to administer and enforce a new set of laws and customs based on the Khajiitic philosophy, which reorganized their clans into profit-driven syndicates led by a Khajiit or Lorda. Known to have a number of meanings depending on the interpretation, some of the translations for the Huttese word Khajiitic included business enterprise, the means by which we prosper, and somebody's gotta have it, why not us? No longer interested in military conquest, the Hutts now focused on manipulating galactic events from the shadows, using assassinations, theft, blackmail, subterfuge, and economic pressure to expand their influence. Although competition among the syndicates was encouraged to eliminate the weakest among them, Hutts avoided directly attacking each other in favor of fighting through mercenaries and slave armies, thereby minimizing the deaths of their own people. Dedicated to the Khajiitic philosophy, the Hutts once again started to expand their holdings, and in doing so engaged in border disputes with the growing Galactic Republic, resulting in raids on the planets Lexrol, Drogheda, Hathrox, Imram, and Parkove Minor. Plundering and enslaving these enemy populations, the Hutts' only defeat was on Parkove Minor, where the Belasco Free Volunteers successfully defended their homeworld and even launched a counterattack, slaughtering the Utadori and Vigilikai Khajiitics on the planet Afavan. These conflicts fomented fear, resentment, and hatred of the Hutts, allowing the human-centric, goddess-worshipping Pius Dea cult to rally support against alien species, growing their movement within the Republic until 11987 BBY, when their candidate, Constipex I, was elected Supreme Chancellor. Ruling the government for the next 1,000 years, Pius Dea launched dozens of violent crusades against various non-human species, greatly expanding Republic territory while gradually diminishing in popularity even among their own people. Initially targeting the unpopular Hutts, the First, Third, and Fourth Crusades were fought against the Khajiitics, pushing their borders back as much as possible. Yet as time went on, and Pius Dea continued to war with their neighbors, some of their own citizens started to abandon the Republic, with many migrating to Hutt space in hopes of a better life. The endless wars and violence inflicted by this radical government at last ended in 10966 BBY, when brought down by a powerful alliance that included the Republic Navy and Jedi Order. With the fall of Pius Dea, the Hutts returned to galactic prominence, growing their influence primarily through trade, even seeing a boost to their reputation when Blotus the Hutt, who grew wealthy administering mining planets, abandoned his allegiance to the Grand Council and joined the Republic, where he was eventually elected Supreme Chancellor. Serving for 275 years during the Rhyanitis period between 9000 and 8000 BBY, Blotus was remembered as one of the greatest leaders in Republic history, praised for his focus on economic development, enacting a number of positive changes, including tax breaks for independent merchants which bolstered trade in the core worlds. Among the other notable figures that meaningfully impacted galactic events, there was Arba the Hutt of Koros Major, an unusually fair and sometimes generous business mogul that took in and raised the humans Gav and Jory Daragon after the deaths of their parents. In the year 5000 BBY, the Daragon siblings set off on their ship Starbreaker 12 to explore a new hyperspace route, and in doing so, accidentally discovered the Sith homeworld Korriban, arriving during the funeral of the legendary Dark Lord Marka Ragnos. Using them in his bid for power, the Sith Lord Naga Sadow recruited Gav Daragon as his apprentice, while allowing Jory Daragon to escape captivity in order to track her ship as it traveled back to the Republic. Upon solidifying his position as Dark Lord of the Sith, Naga Sadow began the Great Hyperspace War by invading Republic planets, including Koros Major, where Gav Daragon witnessed his men murder his father figure, Arba the Hutt, after which Jory arrived and furiously blamed her brother for the death of the one who raised them. Devastated by the loss of Arba and the harsh words of his sister, Gav abandoned the dark side and flew a ship to Sadow's meditation sphere, where he opened fire, distracting the Dark Lord long enough for the Republic to launch a counterattack and repel the invasion. On the verge of defeat, Sadow caused a supernova to destroy all nearby ships and their crews, including his former apprentice, who made a final act of contrition by giving the Republic the coordinates to Korriban and warning their fleet to leave before the explosion. Able to prosper for thousands of years through legitimate trade ventures, the Hutts faced crisis in 4000 BBY when the star of the Kier system went supernova, destroying their section of the Utmian-Pabul hyperspace route, greatly reducing the importance of Nal Hutta as a major commercial power in the galaxy. Forced to refocus their efforts toward criminal enterprises, their moon Nar Shaddaa transformed from a prominent trade hub to a seedy shadow port for smugglers and pirates. Emerging as one of the most powerful crime syndicates in the galaxy, the Hutt Cartel faced intense competition throughout the Jedi Civil War and Dark Wars, primarily from the Exchange, a new gang growing so influential they soon became the most prominent organization on Nar Shaddaa. Challenging Hutt dominance even on their own moon, for a time the Exchange was led by Godo, a super-intelligent droid so successful as a crime lord, he became a target of assassination for bounty hunters hired by enemies like Voga the Hutt. While the Exchange continued to exist past 3627 BBY, the Hutts eventually took back control of Nar Shaddaa, and for a brief time even allied with the Exchange to oppose the Harito-walled syndicate on the mining station mek-sha. Although the Hutts remained neutral during the Great Galactic War from 3681 to 3653 BBY, they did partner with the Republic to mine adrenals on the planet Quesh, a project led by 3 Hutt clans eager to exploit the opportunity for profit. Yet when the Sith learned of this secret deal, the Hutt Grand Council was forced to denounce and oppose the 3 Hutt clans, declaring them outlaws acting without approval. Determined to end this partnership, the Sith sent a strike team which disrupted the mining operation and assassinated the Hutt leaders. After the Sith declared victory in the Great Galactic War, the Hutts once again remained neutral during the Cold War that followed, hosting criminal elements from all sides on Nar Shaddaa. However, some individuals did choose to ally with a specific faction, like Kabura the Hutt, who operated the HoloNet communications grid on behalf of the Sith Empire. Seeking further allies, the Sith sent an espionage agent to frame the Republic in an attack against Suda Nemro, and in doing so successfully won his support for the Empire. Yet the Republic also had its allies, like Barish Fennec Toril, who eagerly aided them in order to exact vengeance against the Mountain Syndicate, which stole leadership of the Kintan King's crime gang on Nar Shaddaa. After the supposed death of the Emperor, the Hutts under Supreme Mogo Taboro stepped out of the shadows to put forth their own claim as a dominant superpower, invading the planet mek-sha to mine Isotope 5, a radioactive form of Illyrium known as the rarest substance in the galaxy, able to warp gravitational and electromagnetic fields so that even a small amount produced enormous energy, citing the example of 1 microgram able to power a datapad for a century. Planning to exploit Isotope 5 to manufacture weapons to conquer the galaxy, Taboro was ready to exterminate the entire population of mek-sha in order to extract what he needed. Unwilling to die for Hutt ambitions, the local population formed a resistance movement which allied with the Republic and ended the operation. When the other Hutts realized the mission failed, they abandoned Toboro and negotiated passage off Mekeb. Among those that escaped was Dr. Juvard Ilip Agurab, the former chief scientist of the project who agreed to help end the reign of his former employer, believing Toboro had gone mad. When a Republic strike force at last confronted the Hutt leader, he refused to surrender and attempted to ignite his entire stock of Isotope 5 to destroy all nearby enemies, even at the cost of his own life. Yet the plan failed and Toboro died just before his palace collapsed. Failing to become a legitimate galactic superpower, the Hutts returned to their rule as crime lords for the next 2,500 years, until the new Sith era, when they lost a number of worlds to Dark Lords expanding into their space. Yet by 1032 BBY, the Sith had lost any semblance of unity, with petty warlords fighting among themselves for dominance. Steadily in decline, the Republic made matters worse for the Sith by cutting off their communication relays, which then allowed the Hutts to reconquer their lost worlds, making deals with some Sith Lords while destroying any who opposed them. Confident in their growing strength, Zodo the Hutt sought to expand beyond their space by invading the planet Aqualaris held by Sith Lord Daemon. Yet the Republic sent a fleet to help defend the population, and in the end, Zodo was captured and killed by the Sith. Although most Hutts were eager to seek profit, some few found callings outside their normal business operations, like Beldorion, a rare Force-sensitive Hutt who trained as a Jedi from 600 to 400 BBY. Arriving on Namchorios, Beldorion found that local crystals amplified his powers and fell to the dark side, ruling the planet as a dictator. Centuries later, some years before the Clone Wars, Jabba Desalijik Tiur rose as a powerful Hutt crime lord who eventually united the clans under his leadership, convincing them it was more profitable to work together rather than compete against each other, expanding their space to include planets like Tatooine, Gindain, and Tungal. Although they remained neutral during the Clone Wars, using the opportunity to profiteer as much as possible, they started to lose influence in some of their systems, which sided with the Separatists against the Republic. Even so, some, like Burka the Hutt, chose to work with the Confederacy of Independent Systems, relaying intelligence about their enemies. Jabba, meanwhile, aided whatever side offered the most profit, like when he smuggled Cortosis to the Separatists. Yet when the Republic saved his son, he returned the favor by granting them passage through the Arcanus sector, where Separatists were not permitted. Though their most lucrative trade deals were with the Separatists, a conflict arose when they started recruiting mercenaries from the Hutt world Gamor, and so the Grand Council petitioned the Confederacy of Independent Systems and arranged a compromise wherein the Separatists paid a fee for every soldier recruited. Ever eager to seek profitable opportunities, Tagta the Hutt destroyed the Republic's ships in the Sheila Run, planning to demand 1 billion credits from the government in exchange for safe passage. To investigate the situation, the Jedi Council sent Obi-Wan Kenobi and Grandmaster Yoda, who neutralized Tagta's forces, before negotiating a deal to pay only 1 credit for Republic passage through the Sheila Run, while demanding Tagta also prevent any Separatist presence, or else their government would launch a more thorough investigation into his criminal activities. While Jabba convinced most Hutt to work together rather than against each other, not all were willing to unite under his leadership, like Zero the Hutt, who plotted to kidnap Jabba's son Rhoda, only to be foiled and arrested by the Republic. Fearing what he might reveal since he kept records of all Hutt activities in a holodiary, the Grand Council hired the famed bounty hunter Cad Bane, who successfully freed Zero and brought him back to Hutt space. Imprisoned on Nal Hutta, Zero was freed by his former lover, the Palowick Sice Noodles, and together they recovered the holodiary from the grave of Zero's father on Teth. Yet it was all a ruse, and Sice Noodles killed Zero before returning the diary to her employer, Jabba the Hutt. After the Clone Wars, destruction of the Jedi Order, and fall of the Republic, the Hutts agreed to join the Galactic Empire under Emperor Palpatine, but negotiated a special deal where they provided financial support in exchange for greater autonomy in their space. Remaining largely independent with only a nominal allegiance to the Empire, the Hutts maintained their laws, government, and customs, including the continuation of the slave trade, and when confronted by Imperial authority, bribed officials or leveraged their extensive political and economic influence across the galaxy. working diligently to undermine the Empire's oversight. The Hutts prevented their territory from being divided into Imperial sectors, ignored Imperial decrees, and hired an army of smugglers led by Mako Spence and Han Solo to stop an Imperial task force from disrupting criminal activity on Nar Shaddaa. Although the Hutts proved difficult to control, the Empire did take steps to ensure at least some level of compliance by annexing Hutt systems and successfully applying pressure to report on rebel activity in their space. As the war between the Empire and Rebel Alliance intensified, the Hutts remained neutral and, as was their custom, sought to profit from the conflict, like after the Battle of Yavin when they sent an expeditionary force under the Celestin Osei Malaya to salvage wreckage from the Death Star, selling what they recovered to both sides. Navigating their way through galactic politics to maintain their power and influence, the Hutts were soon challenged by the Xan Consortium, an emerging crime syndicate founded by Tiber Xan during his time as a student in the Imperial Academy, which ultimately led to his expulsion and a lifelong hatred of the Empire. Although Xan worked with the Hutts for a time, Jabba eventually saw him as a rival and successfully attacked the Consortium base on Ryloth. Recovering as best he could, Tiber Xan attacked and defeated Jabba's outposts on the planet Saleucami. The Consortium then won a final battle over a droid factory on Hypori, after which they negotiated a peace where Jabba recalled the bounty on Tiber Xan and ceased his attacks on their operations in exchange for an end to hostilities against the Hutts. After Jabba's death in 4 ABY, the Hutt clans fought a civil war, with Durga Basadi Tai, leader of the Black Sun's criminal syndicate, emerging as the dominant power on Nal Hutta. Determined to conquer an empire, Durga hired the engineer and architect Bevel Emelisk, responsible for building a number of prominent superweapons, including the Death Star prototype, First Death Star, the Tarkin Project's ionic cannon superlaser, the Second Death Star, and the Eclipse Dreadnought. Seeking a superweapon of his own, Durga allied with the Imperial technician Sulamar, who claimed to be a general, and arranged for the hive mind Hutt Species to provide the labor necessary for the construction of the Darksaber in 12 ABY, a battle station which could fire a super laser capable of destroying a planet. When the New Republic learned of Durga's ambitions, they sent a strike team to track down and disrupt the project, and while they all lost their lives as a result, they provided coordinates to General Wedge Antilles, who led a fleet in pursuit. Although the Darksaber tried to evade enemy ships by navigating through an asteroid field, the battle station proved poorly constructed and was destroyed, killing those on board, including Durga the Hutt. Following the death of Durga, leadership of the Basadi clan fell to Borga Basadi Diori, who cast aside the usual neutrality of the Hutts to negotiate a treaty with the Yuuzhan Vong during their galaxy-wide invasion in 25 ABY. Recognizing the serious threat posed by these extragalactic creatures, the Hutts offered several worlds to prepare their forces, as well as the transport of captives and slaves to the Vong, in exchange for their ships staying clear of rim-ward Hutt space, along with the worlds Rhodia, Ryloth, Tatooine, Kessel, and certain planets in the Cyclada cluster and Cathol sector. The Hutts also sought no interference in their criminal activities, and sufficient warning before a planet was attacked so they could steer clear or evacuate their people. However, as was often the case with the Hutts, they always had a contingency plan to ensure they were not on the losing side of a conflict, and so cut a secret backroom deal with the New Republic, providing intelligence to aid them in their war against the Vong. Therefore, when the smuggler Talon Card met with Borga's agent Krev Bombassa, he was provided a list of worlds the Hutts were avoiding, which Card could relay to his New Republic allies. Yet the Vong suspected Hutt treachery, and so informed Borga they would attack Corellia, while instead sending their ships to engage in the Battle of Fondor. Despite being misled about Corellia, Borga the Hutt offered more intelligence to the New Republic when he learned the Vong cluster ship Kresh held a Jedi Knight prisoner. After a hard-fought battle, the New Republic emerged victorious at Fondor, leaving the Vong enraged at the betrayal of Borga, prompting Supreme Commander Noschoka to lead a 2-year campaign against the Hutts. Attacking Nal Hutta and Nar Shaddaa, the Vong attempted to terraform the Hutt homeworld and its moon, though they ultimately proved resistant to many of these transformations. Nevertheless, the Hutts were in a terrible position, as Borga lost support from her own people, and was forced to defend their home with only half their total forces, eventually losing the conflict and ending up a prisoner. Although some of those on Nal Hutta were spared in exchange for serving the Vong, many others were executed or else fled to worlds like Gamor, Rhodia, and Tatooine, which became their new temporary homeworld. Suffering greatly during the Yuuzhan Vong War, the Hutts eventually reclaimed Nal Hutta and Nar Shaddaa, but underwent a social, political, and military reformation, concluding that the era of the Khajiitic philosophy had run its course, as shadow manipulation, economic pressure, and underworld dealings had not protected them from this most recent conflict. Reverting to a more militaristic mindset, the Hutts built a fleet of warships with built-in self-destruct systems to prevent other species from recovering their technology. As new superpowers emerged by 39 ABY, the Hutts remained independent by refusing to join the Five Worlds or Galactic Alliance, yet they did briefly ally with the Five Worlds in 40 ABY when they became the Corellian Confederation, joining them in the Battle of Balmorra and Battle of Kuat during the Second Galactic Civil War against the Alliance. Although the Confederation was ultimately defeated, many admired and feared the military technology and capabilities of the Hutts. The Hutts then suffered a significant loss in 44 ABY when the lost tribe of the Sith attacked the Fountain of Ancients on Klaatu'i, an important holy site which the Hutts promised to protect in the Treaty of Vontor. As they failed to protect the fountain, the Klaatuinians declared the treaty void and rose up in rebellion against their masters, finally casting off the shackles of servitude, as did the Nikto and Vodrons, becoming part of a larger galaxy-wide movement to end slavery. Decades later, in 130 ABY, the Hutts sought to avoid subjugation by the Empire of the One Sith led by Darth Krayt, and so established cordial relations in which they tracked down and handed over any Jedi enemies that appeared in their space. Yet this appeasement did not last long, and by 137 ABY, the Hutts joined the Alliance remnant in their war against the One Sith. If you're looking for something new to read, why not check out Fugitives of Helheim by Alex E. Martin, a longtime follower of Civilization X, and author of a great new fantasy book based on Norse mythology about two long-lost brothers from the famous Volsung bloodline meeting for the first time in the underworld after dying in glorious deaths. This infamous dragon slayer and shapeshifter learn they've been granted a second chance at attaining paradise, but must claw their way through the underworld's undead legions to earn it. It's an all-or-nothing gamble against the Queen of the Underworld, Hell, where their souls are the prize. They forge unlikely alliances with gods, Valkyries, and powerful beings, fight infamous villains, confront the ghosts of their past, and battle against insurmountable odds to inch closer to salvation. If interested, be sure to check out the link below, or go to Amazon.com where the book is available for purchase. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Tamika the Black Wolf, Sir Xavier, Defender of the Flame, Ishmam Ahmed of Shamiriana, and Admiral Flint. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can gain early access to videos and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.